Welcome to this week's episode of The Illicit Feminine. I am your host, Elizabeth Marth. And the whole month of September, I am going to be talking about relationships. They are something that is my heart, my work, the self and relationships, really, amongst money and health and a few other things in life, really the relationship that we have with ourselves, which of course always means God, source, divine, the universe, as well as the relationships that we have with others, and others encompasses everything, is really the most important thing in my estimation. The other things all come from the energy that we live in with ourselves and in our relationships. So, over the month of September, we are going to be talking about relationships as far as marriage, as far as different ways that people do really romantic relationships. So, I am beginning a new journey called The Question to Stay or to Go. And it really is a very personal piece of my work, as well as a piece of conscious uncoupling. And I'll get into that a little bit later. It is a question that I work with many different people on. It is a question that I have lived. And that is a topic and experience that I believe deserves so much focus. I'm also going to be talking to some women about open marriages and their choice to experiment with that, what that looks like, because the term of open marriages is like a huge spectrum, as well as a woman who has chosen celibacy due to relationship experiences in the past. And we're going to hear about her year-long journey of celibacy and what that looked like that deepened her relationship with her and what she is hoping to create in the future with her relationships. And then we are going to be talking about the different ways that if one decides to stay or go, that can look like. So that's going to take on a little bit of a conscious uncoupling vibe, but also it's 2025. And as much as this may piss off a lot of people, marriage, as well as separation, as well as divorce, as well as partnerships, get to look very different than they ever have before. And I think this is amazing. I think it makes some people really uncomfortable. And I understand that. It brings up a lot of fears, a lot of different triggers around people's sense of security, around people's sense of morality, around people's sense of love. So, we're going to talk about all those things because that is what we do here on The Illicit Feminine, where nothing sacred is silenced, because all of these conversations are important and they are affecting people, they are affecting women. And so, I want to have them. So, let's start today. Our conversation is about the question of staying or going. Maybe this is a question that you have lived, that you have questioned within yourself, that you have contemplated and have shoved to the back of your mind because it's not something that you even want to think about. Maybe this is affecting someone that you know, a family member, a friend, a business associate. If so, please pass this podcast along. So many people suffer in silence around the subject because it is not a popular topic. This topic triggers the fuck out of people. It threatens what they know. It threatens what's familiar. It threatens, like I said, their religious beliefs, their moral beliefs. Once you are married, there is a school of thought that you stay married no matter what. You stick it out. There are people who will brag that they have been married 70 years. And for like the last 40, they'd never spoken to each other, right? They can't really stand each other, but by God, they lasted. And there was a time and a place for that, we could say. And it doesn't have to be like that anymore. The more that we are raising our consciousness levels, the more that we are up leveling our awareness, the more that we are becoming more emotional intelligent, more compassionate, more desiring for the best for everyone to be happy, things are changing. They're changing. So I'll share a little bit of my backstory. I actually did this in a somewhat of a shady way. I was on a podcast of two women that I absolutely adore, and we were talking about conscious uncoupling. And I had made it a point never to share my own personal story in my work. maybe with my clients, very rarely with my clients, but definitely not on my particular podcast, not on my videos or my social media. And I did. I got into a conversation, and then it wasn't even really in my awareness that I had shared that I was separated. And never in the soul version of me, the higher version of me, would I have said this to the public before discussing it with my husband. And I did. Very crass, very, not that I did it crassly, but it was like a crass, not cool move. And he actually had a family member reach out, and that was how he found out that I had talked about this. That caused some damage and wasn't at all in integrity with how I wanted to be. When this is aired, it will have been a conversation that I have had with my husband that it is important for my work and for the women that I believe need to hear this, that I share as much as my story that feels good. We have children, we have family. And so while we are walking the question, I believe it's important to keep some discernment around that. I'm really going to take on the lens of my experience so that it stays as clean as I can keep it. I had been unhappy in my marriage for quite some time, which isn't a surprise because I had been very unhappy with myself when I got married. I barely knew myself. I had come out of an enmeshed relationship. I mean, not even come out. I was living in a enmeshed relationship with my mother. And I met my husband, who was a wonderful man. He is one of the best men that I know, and really like everything that you should want. I had been living my life as shoulds. I was supposed to go to college. I did. I was supposed to get a degree and graduate, and I did. I was supposed to get a job, and I did. When I met my husband, we had a connection. The version of myself that I was then appreciated so much his stability and his work ethic. He came from a big Sicilian family. And while he came from a very large family and I came from a smaller family, our family values were the same. My family was from Britain, not my dad, but my mom and my grandmother had all immigrated here earlier in their lives. And so traditions were very important. I was also raised in a very traditional family style. My dad worked, my mom stayed at home. And that was a lot of the same family values that my husband also felt. When we met, as lost as I was, we formed a good marriage. We were really great partners. I did not understand what it meant really to be married as an adult. I don't think that I understood. I was functioning as an adult, but emotionally, love and connection, true connection, were foreign and not necessarily safe to me. And I think that there's probably some reciprocation given some of the things that my husband had experienced as well. So it was both of us in this seemingly really good marriage, especially from the outside. Okay, so fast forward, very many different things happened, as do in everybody's lives. And it's probably after a decade, I began to question whether or not like this was the right thing, and continued really up until the passing of my mother. So when I began questioning, I didn't understand that I was married. I had two young kids. We were taking care of family. We had a home. We had lives. Like we were amazing partners. My husband worked and provided, and I made a home and took care of the kids and all of those other pieces. It worked. It was like a well-run machine. I was missing connection. I was missing a deeper soul level connection. I was missing pieces. And yet I didn't know how to communicate that. There were things that weren't working that I pretended were. So I wasn't honest. I didn't know how to be honest. Being honest about how I felt or what I wanted or what I needed wasn't in my lexicon. I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't know that I could do that. I just needed to make myself what he wanted me to be, what I wanted to be, but I didn't feel it. I don't know if any of you can relate to that. For those of you who haven't ever experienced that, you're like, what the fuck? Like, how could you do that? Well, until you walk in someone else's shoes, you'll never know what you're capable of doing. So, as this went on, and after my mom died, which was 5 years ago tomorrow, things really started to change. And my husband and I started to have really honest conversations about what we both were unhappy about, what wasn't working, what we wanted to be different. And there was still not the question of leaving. For me, it was a financial piece. Even though financially there had been several things that had happened in my world that would have allowed me to leave at that point, that wasn't even something that I could fathom as a possibility. Like me being on my own, financially, that was a question, but that wasn't a reality. I absolutely, in the financial world, could have, but that wasn't a truth for me. That wasn't even something that I could say was a possibility because all of my own fears, but then all of the fears that you hear of the outside world around choosing to leave a marriage or a relationship and then start again as a single mother, that just scared the absolute shit out of me, like terror. Like I couldn't even move past that. So I began doing my own. I had been doing, emotional growth work and shadow work and really like chipping away at these pieces. It was literally like a sculpture where you start with like a block of clay. I mean, for years, I have been doing work for years. And it has been a process each step. It has been a chipping away each step. So when I had been healing more of myself, but still not to the point of understanding, I had this whole layer of myself underneath that, like, I was completely abandoning. And when I started to look at that, I started to see how I was showing up in our relationship. I was resentful. I was pissed. I put my family first, my mother first. I put my kids first, which I don't regret that. That's not a great way people say to do a marriage. Even though I came from an enmeshed relationship with my mother, I never felt like I actually married as a separate human being. So it was really important for me to make sure that my kids understood that I loved them for them. They were not extensions of me. And so putting my kids first was just part of my soul contract and soul learning this lifetime. And I don't have regrets over that, even though that's not necessarily what is recommended when you are trying to have a really strong relationship. There's different theories on that. So when we began to understand, and my husband was getting his own help, and we were getting help together, and then we like moved on to getting different help. And I mean, this has been a process that has not been taken lightly. And when I began to get certified in conscious uncoupling, it was because I wanted to learn. Catherine Woodward Thomas is the creator and author of Conscious Uncoupling. And I wanted to understand what that looked like. Like, I knew that if we were going to get a divorce, I wanted it to be amicable. I wanted it to be so different than all of the horrible things I had heard, right? Because I knew it could be. I didn't know how I knew I could be. I just knew it could be. Like everything else that I know, it doesn't have to be like the way that it is. So much of the world doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to be that way. We can be loving and kind. Partly with conscious uncoupling, I worked that program with my mother because she had passed and we had a lot of unresolved issues. And partly I worked that program to see if I did want to stay or go in my marriage. And then I worked that program to see what my part was. I'd been blaming my husband for pretty much everything and negating to look at myself. I had been doing my own self work on myself, but I wasn't looking at how I was showing up in relationship. Where was I not meeting his needs? Where was I not meeting my own standards of being a partner? And so when I began to look at this, things did begin to shift. I began to see our relationship differently. I began to think that there was possibility, that there was hope, like there were these different avenues that would make it possible. And so the question continued to rage in my mind. I mean, it literally became an obsession of what we were supposed to do, of what I was supposed to do. I've shared before, I was raised in a Christian household, even though it was definitely some mysticism and feminism and different things within that range. Yet I held these strong values that, like, you don't get a divorce. Nothing against divorce. I have family members that are divorced. My mom and dad were both divorced. I think divorce is a beautiful gift that, when used correctly, is for the highest good of all involved. So, where this conditioning in my mind I don't believe divorce is an answer. It is not going to clear everything up. It is going to bring a whole new network of circumstances and situations for you to learn from and from us to evolve from. But it is a means in which, in scenarios, is a blessing, I believe. That was very much what I saw in my parents' marriage. I think that they probably both would have been a lot happier if they had divorced. My parents ended up hating each other at the end. It was really sad to watch and really sad to see. I think that it was the same with my grandparents, right? They were in a horrifically abusive relationship, and they just kept on going, stayed the course. And then I think being in both of our families where divorce was looked down upon, and it was like once somebody got a divorce, then they're ostracized, like they're out. So there were all these different factors kind of going through my mind, right? Of the what ifs. And when my husband and I eventually decided to separate, it was to get clarity around whether we were to stay or go in our relationship. And there's several other dynamics that are pieces of our relationship that aren't appropriate to go into at this time that do play huge factors. So that's a little bit of my background story. And the reason that I'm giving you that is this has been my life. To stay or to go didn't start with my marriage. And most likely, if you are going through this scenario, it didn't start with your marriage either. It started way back where you were a relationship, possibly in your childhood, in which you felt was your safety and your security. And it also may not have been safe. It was a relationship of opposites. So while it was your safety, then it was also your trauma. And when we get into those types of relationships, it's a complete and utter mind fuck. And so leaving, which wasn't possible as children, gets to be our pattern when we then are in relationships that may no longer be serving us. When someone is stuck very deep in the question of should I stay or should I go, this is a possibility that there are past relationships that you were never able to leave and that you just held out and like molded yourself into them or made the best of them. That is what I'm hoping to help women and couples within this new program, this new work that I am creating, my version of the work. It's obviously not new work. I've been through should I stay or should I go coaching. I have done hypnosis around it. I have done countless hours of therapy, read almost every book out there on the subject, done coaching around it with conscious uncoupling when I was going through the certification process. It is a topic that I am well versed in, both in real life as well as education, I guess, if that's what you would say, in training. But what I've come to realize is that the questions that a lot of people are asking, or the trainings that a lot of people are doing, they're getting it backwards, especially if you are aligning with a enmeshed family relationship in childhood, a disavowal of yourself, meaning like you were taught from a very young age to abandon yourself for the needs of others so that they could be happy, so then you could feel safe. And that's a pattern that you've created unintentionally with a lot of your other relationships and experiences. So it doesn't just have to be a relationship, it can be your other life choices. So when you are beginning to feel like you may not want to stay in the relationship that you are in, it feels like almost like you're in a roller coaster where they strap you in and you can't get the fuck out. And it's not about getting the fuck out of the relationship. It's actually about getting the fuck out of your head, because that is where you live. It is a question. It is a constant. You are comparing every situation. What would it be like of this? How am I financially going to support myself? How am I going to make it as a single woman? Do I want to be a single woman? What does that mean? Do you actually want to date? Do you not want to date? How are my kids? Are my kids going to, like, first of all, what are the living arrangements going to be? Are my kids going to be messed up? Are my kids going to hate me? Are they going to hate him? What happens when you start bringing other people into the situation? What happens with grandchildren? Like the roller coaster And I'm not saying this is for everybody, right? This isn't everybody's experience. But if you have self-abandonment issues, if you have mother wounds or father wounds, if you have trust issues with yourself, if you have abuse in your background, this may be how the question of should I stay or should I go shows up in your world. I'm going to read a little bit of what I wrote yesterday, and it is a piece of my heart that will be published on my Substack account. I think it encompasses, it's not just me. I think that it is a journey, and I'm going to read it. And then if you're interested in knowing more about my new program, my new journey called The Question, should I stay or should I go? I'm going to be doing a free masterclass next week, and I'll get that information out. It'll be in the show notes. And I hope for those who may be going through this, you understand you're not alone, that your feelings are not personal, meaning it is not just you who is going through them, that there are hundreds of thousands of women and men in this situation. And this is a subject that is not talked enough about because it scares the shit out of people. I had someone be really open and honest, and they shared with me that a friend was leaving her marriage. And this person was really honest about how much it freaked them out. If that marriage that had been lasted for however many decades could end, what did that mean for this person's marriage? We haven't really even touched on the subjects that when you are in the question of should I stay or should I go, how that other circumstances are affected, how your family treats you, how your friends treat you, what it looks like if you're even thinking about this, your own rejection of yourself. So maybe I'll kind of do another podcast about that because that is a walk that I have walked as well. Okay, so here goes. So I'm noticing that one of my patterns throughout my life is that people tell me what I should do, and then I adapt to that. This was really more before I began my own deep journey. And yet this pattern still shows up. I am learning to alchemize it, which means heal it and release it, change one circumstance into something different. And because this was such a deeply embedded pattern, I give myself the grace that I'm training myself to do this. I compromise my feelings, my needs, and my desires to fit into what I should do. I have been doing this with God, with this journey, with this decision. I want God or someone to tell me what is for my highest good. I want God to tell me what I should do so that I don't have to. Or maybe because I'm learning how to, because I forgot to pay attention to my own feelings, my own needs, my own desires. This journey is about me becoming in tune with myself. It is about me not looking to someone else to tell me what I should do, and then I mold myself into that. It is about what do I desire? The responsibility of that feels overwhelming. What if I choose wrong? What if I don't like my choice? What if I want to go back to the way it was and I've completely burned that bridge? What if I burn my life down and hate myself for it? How am I supposed to actually trust my desires when I've been avoiding them for most of my life? I can see that this is the work that is continuing to be what I hone in on and what I desire to pay attention to. I desire to pay attention to my feelings, to pay attention to my thoughts, and to pay attention to what energy these different parts are in. Is it in my soul or is it in my fear? This feels revolutionary. I've hired people to tell me what to do, to give me processes, to get me clear to the answer. It's not about the answer. It's not about staying or going. It's more about me learning me. It's more about me becoming self-centered, which is always self-centered in the divine way. So it's always that divine version of you. It's about me beginning to trust myself and to pay attention to myself. That's what it's really about. It's about me focusing and paying attention to how I feel and what I want. It's about my journey. It's about my understanding that God is my source and nothing else. Nothing else is my source of money. Nothing else is my source of safety. Nothing else is my source of joy. Nothing else is my source of fulfillment or activity. I am that for me. My relationships are just reflections of my relationship with myself. I don't know who is meant to hear this, but I know that there is someone or maybe many someone. I do encourage you to share this if you know somebody who is walking this path, even if this conversation doesn't resonate with you. I do think I'm going to do a second part of this to delve into the feelings of rejection and abandonment which are just fears that come up when we are looking to leave anything, whether it's a relationship, whether it is a job, whether it is a home. I think there's more to this. Like I said, for people who are really, really intentional about wanting to get clarity of whether to stay or go, I have a high level program for couples. I have a high level program for individuals. It is intense work. It is deep work. It is an investment in yourself and in your relationship, but it is beautiful work and it is worth it. Okay, I think that is it for today. Thank you for joining me on the Illicit Feminine, and I will see you next time.